All right, so your kid is getting into baseball and you're super excited about it, but you're a little bit overwhelmed with all the equipment options. Maybe you played baseball growing up like I did, and you thought you knew, and you went to the store and you were confused by all the markings on the bat and all the different options, or maybe you've never played before. I am here to help answer your standard questions and to point you in the right direction so you know what is worth spending your money on and what is not. Now, I do want to preface with this with saying this is for younger kids. I'm talking about like C-ball age. Once you get into A-ball, B-ball, A-ball, and above, kids kind of know what they need. And so this is when you're sort of first getting into it. It can be overwhelming, and so I want to help you with that. So let's jump right in. I'm going to start first with the equipment that isn't necessarily on the field with them, but it's still very important, and that is going to be bat bags and helmets. And so with bat bags, there are a ton of options out there. A lot of it is purely aesthetic, but there's one thing that you need to look out for when you're looking through these different bat bag options, and that is size. A lot of the bat bags, these backpack style, which didn't exist when I was a kid, these backpack style are the most popular now. This is what everybody's going to have. This is what you're going to want, unless you go with the full rolly suitcase style. But a lot of them, this one included, are a little bit too small to fit a helmet. And so what happens is you end up with a situation like this one, and I'll show you. This is my son's old bat bag, where the helmet doesn't quite fit. You got to like kind of bend it to put it out. And so then you end up with a 7-year-old in the corner of the dugout trying to do this, and he can't get it, and the team's calling for him to hit, and it can be really frustrating. And so do not buy, even if you've got a little T-baller, don't buy the smallest size bat bag. When you're in the store, when you're online, make sure that a helmet can easily fit. One like this is larger in size. It doesn't take up a whole lot more space on their back, but it's got a significantly wider opening. Do you see the difference in how well that fits? This one also has a couple different aspects to it that let it, but this will fit a bag, it'll fit a glove, it'll fit a second glove. I could throw cleats and stuff like that in there if I wanted to. It'll fit everything. And I promise you're gonna want that extra room when your kid goes to, pack their own book bag or pack their own back bag, I should say, at the end of a game, in the beginning of a game when they're trying to get out. So make sure you get one that is bigger than the smallest size. And if you happen to be at a store, just grab a helmet off the rack, put it in the back bag, make sure your kid can do it. And if they can, great. If not, you don't want to do it. Trust me, you do not want to have the smallest bat bag. That is a nightmare every game, before the game, after the game, and so forth. So big bat bag, that's the easy part. The next piece is a helmet. And this is a critical piece of equipment, but it's not quite as in play as, say, a bat or cleats or a glove or something like that. With the helmet, I'm going to give some advice that's probably counterintuitive to what you might think, and that is that you do not need to buy one that they'll grow into. On a helmet, you need to get one that fits snugly. If it is loose at all, what happens is once it's on their head, it's going to start doing this, right? It's going to fit their head like this. You're going to see them running around the bases with it like this. It'll fall off sometimes, and then quite frankly, it's really not doing the job of a helmet. If it falls off or if their whole forehead's exposed, it's not really protecting them, and they're also not getting used to what it's supposed to feel like, and so they're not going to like it. They're going to want to throw it off. They're just not a big fan of it. So get a helmet that fits snug, like it's almost a little bit tough to get on, and if you have to get another one in a couple years, so be it. But trust me, you do not want to go with an oversized helmet because that's going to cause more problems than it's worth. Now, when it comes to bats, this is kind of the first piece of equipment that I'll get into. When it comes to bats, the very first thing you need to know is what is your league, what are your league rules? There's USA Baseball and USSSA. They sound similar, they're not. USA Baseball is the rules that Little League, the official Little League, plays by, and then USSSA or USSSA is Travel Ball or Dixie Youth, whatever it used to be called, which is a different affiliation entirely. Some kids play on both teams. They have a rec ball team that does USA Baseball, and they have others. The way you can tell is there's this stamp on the bat. So this one says USA Baseball. Okay, so USA Baseball, that means in any Little League or USA Baseball league, this bat is perfectly legal. If there's a stamp here that says USSSA, that is not legal. You cannot use that in a Little League sanctioned game. You can use it in travel ball and other things. And so the first thing you want to do is make sure you have the right stamp. The league will know, your coach will know, just ask somebody. They'll tell you which stamp that you're going to use. The second question is what size? Really here, there's no rhyme or reason. I have seen 6-year-olds that use 28-inch bats. I've seen 8-year-olds that use 25-inch bats, The weights are all over the place as well. So there's really no rhyme or reason here. It just kind of depends on how big and strong your kid is. This is another situation where your best advice is to go to the store, have them pick some up. On average, when you're about 6 years old, you would be using a 26-inch bat. At 7 years old, around a 27. At 8, a 28. But again, that's kind of just your starting point. What I would recommend is go ahead and go with the thicker barrel. They have 2 different barrel diameters. Both of them are legal. This one is the 2, and this is the bigger size, which I think is 2 5/8. They have a 2 1/4, which is the small one that we might remember from Little League. They're both legal, so there's no reason to have the small one. Just go ahead and go with the bigger one. And then my recommendation here is to let your kids swing the biggest bat that they can comfortably swing with the right mechanics. They're going to get the best use out of that. It's usually something that they can grow into a little bit, but you don't want to get a bat that's too small for them or on the verge of too small when they get it. Kids grow a lot at this age, and so I would always get something that's on the end of being too big, but make sure they can still swing it. You don't want to give a 5-year-old a 28-inch drop 10 bat. So when you're looking for a bat, my recommendation is the big barrel. Make sure you get your stamps correct, and then get the biggest bat that they can swing and hold properly. If they can hold it out like this, no problem. They can hold it. If they can do a sort of a ghost swing, that's something that they can manage. If they're holding it and it's like falling out of their hand, or they swing and it spins them in a circle, that's too big for them. The only other thing that you need to know about a bat is the weight. And the way that the weights are written on these bats is usually in terms of a minus number. And people will call that the drop. So like -11 means that if this is a 27-inch bat, the weight in ounces is -11. So it's 27 minus 11. It means 16 ounces. So 27-inch bat, drop 11, 16 ounces. Again, there's really no standard here. -11, -12 is kind of your standard offering. When you start getting into -10, -9, -8, those are usually pretty heavy for kids for the length that they are. -11, -12 is kind of your more standard offering. And so if you had a kid that hasn't played before, if they're let's say they're 6 years old, I would start with like a 26, maybe a drop 12 or a drop 11 with the right stamp. So again, that's just a starting point, but go to the store, try some, let them see. Odds are your team is going to have a ton of them. So this is one of those things where realistically you don't have to have your own bat. When I was a kid, a Little League team might only have 3 bats in the dugout. Now every team my son's been on, there's more bats than kids. So if you don't have your own bat, somebody else will, and that'll be fine. But those are the basics of the bat. I'm going to hit cleats real quick, and then I'll go to what I think is the most important, which is gloves. On cleats, always, always, always buy up a size slightly, at least a half size, maybe sometimes even a full size. For starters, they're going to be wearing baseball socks, which depending on your uniform provider, sometimes those things are really thick. I mean, sometimes they feel like ski or snowboard socks. They're so thick. They puff up, they get stuck. But also the kids just grow. They grow fast. I had cleats last year that were too big for my son at the beginning of the season. And 3 months later, he was like growing out of them. And so I would always recommend to go up a size on your cleats. If they're fitting them tightly at the beginning of the season, they're not going to want to put them on their feet by the end. So when they're small and growing, make sure you either try them on in baseball socks or always size up. So now let's get to in my mind, the question that's the most important, but also the hardest to answer. And that is the glove. What size glove should my kid have? What type of glove should they have? What's important to look for? Like with anything, it really depends on the kid. There's some 7 and 8 year olds that are very advanced and they're catching fly balls, they're catching thrown balls, they're doing backhands and other stuff. Those kids probably know enough to have a little more preference. Then there's 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds that have never even seen a baseball before. They haven't seen a baseball glove. They don't know what they're doing. They're not going to catch anything. And so I say this, acknowledging that it really depends on the situation. But in general, here are some rules for kind of first-time baseball parents that I would give you for what to look out for your kids. One, I would advise you to get a slightly bigger glove than you might think. There are a lot of, kind of T-ball size gloves. And we fell into this trap originally where you think, well, their hand's small, so a smaller glove will be easier to manage. That's not really true. For the most part, what happens is that glove is so small that there's just not much of a pocket. And so as they're trying to learn to catch, there just isn't much room, for it to go. This glove is actually and an 11-inch long. And we had like a 9.5 his first season. It was just too small. There just wasn't much of a pocket. Anytime he did get his glove on a ball, it was right on the palm, which he didn't enjoy. And so I would say go with an 11 and a quarter, maybe even up to an 11.5 inch glove. When you go to buy a glove, if you look right along the inside on either the thumb pad or on the sort of the pinky pad, doesn't matter if it's an old glove, new glove, kid's glove, an adult glove, they're always going to have this sort of stamped in, and it's going to have a number. It'll say 11 inches or 11.5 or 11.25. That is the length of the glove, and that's what you're going to buy based on. Kids' gloves can go all the way from like 8 point something inches on the super small T-ball size up to 12.5 inches for like an outfielder. You're probably going to want to stick in that 11-inch, 11 and a quarter type range for a new kid. But the number one thing I would say is they have to be able to close the glove. Small kids, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, their hands are so small, they just don't fit in the glove very far. They might fit in the glove the same amount as my hand here. My fingers are to about right here in this setting, and I just can't squeeze the glove. And so my son, spent a whole season where people would throw in the ball, it would hit in the pocket, and he just couldn't quite squeeze it. And this would happen just all season long. And eventually we found at a secondhand store, kind of a play it again sports type thing, we found a glove that was old. This is an old glove. I don't know if it's from the early 2000s, or maybe it's a little bit less old than that, but it's old and it's very broken in. When you get older in baseball, you typically wouldn't want one that's so broken in that it's flat like a pancake. But for him, this was a complete game changer, because even by only putting his hands in a little, he's able to close it. And so he went from getting his palm on every ball, but 50% of them falling out, to catching, 95% of the balls that come his way. They all hit in the glove. All of them go in. He's now able to catch backhands, which he couldn't before. They would always hit here and fall out. And so I would say, rather than a new glove that's real leather and it's super stiff, honestly, this is the one area where I would advise you maybe go look at some used stuff. And I don't mean like it was used for a season and then someone sold it. I'm talking about something that was really broken in. The glove that they have when they're 6, 7, 8 years old is not going to be their glove for life anyway. If they continue to play, by the time they're in B-ball, A-ball, certainly high school, they're going to be on, several more iterations of gloves. And so really you're just trying to get them through that intro to the game. And I'm telling you, it is absolutely a game changer. I've talked to several other parents on teams who had similar situations where they had a glove and they were struggling and they made a glove change and the kid could actually close it. And all of a sudden it's like they turned into an all-star. And so even more than size, the number one thing I would say is get a glove that is as soft and floppy as possible. And I would even say not to get a new glove and to look at a used one while they're young. Once they get used to it and they build up the confidence and they kind of learn, like my son will use this for another year, then we'll probably go get him a real glove that's his own and he can break it in. But for now, while he's small, his hand's small, we're using this one. And it, like I said, it has been an absolute game changer. His confidence level is through the roof. It's just been huge for him. The other thing I'll say is sometimes you'll see these little marketing things where they call them like the power notch or the power close or the groove, where they've cut out a section of the glove and the intent is for it to be easier for them to close. This glove doesn't have it, so you can kind of see the difference there. See this, how you've got the V-shaped notch and this one doesn't have that? That is, in theory, makes it easier to close. See how that's kind of bunching right there and this one doesn't? Now, whether that works or not, I don't know. We have tried them and they're with varying levels of success. But what I will say is a really well broken in old glove, regardless of whether it has this, is going to work better 100 times out of 100 than a new glove with whatever technology you want to go to. This is an A550 from Wilson, and it's actually like a really soft, like a synthetic type leather. We got it because it was so soft, I thought it would let him close. And you can see it doesn't take much force at all. But again, the problem is just one of size. His hand just does not go in far enough to be able to close it. And so he needs one that is literally closed on its own, and he actually has to open it, as opposed to one that's naturally open and he closes. So all that said, these are just kind of some tips. If you're a first-time parent or you're getting back into it, you don't really know what to do, keep these in mind. On the glove, I strongly advise you go used, or at least get one that you can really, really, really break in. On the cleats, always go a size up. Half size at least. Honestly, if you go a full size, as long as it's not flopping off their foot, you're still going to be fine. When it comes to bats, size and weight only matter so much. The main thing is get the stamp right. You have to have the regulation correct. So just ask your coach, ask your league. They'll tell you it's either going to be USA Baseball or USSSA. Get that, and then I gave you some starting points. And then the other one is when it comes to helmets, get one that fits snug. You don't want that helmet that's flopping off all the time. And then on the topic of helmets, probably my number one tip for parents, just ease of life here, get a bat bag that is big and has some excess room to fit all your stuff. Otherwise, you are going to constantly be walking from the bleachers into the dugout to help unload their bag, to do it at the end of the game, to do it before the game. And it really is just such a pain. A lot of these bat bags as well have other features and stuff like that where they can hold bats down the side. Some of them are built to hold up to like 4 bats. Now, all that stuff's great, but if it's too small and doesn't fit the actual components, you're going to hate it. So make sure you get an oversized bat bag. So I hope this has been helpful. If you have any other questions or anything else, any thoughts or comments, drop those in the comment section below. I'm happy to answer those. Thanks for watching.